Ready for clarity on your relationship and a path to freedom? Learn more about my validation sessions at coachingwithdrheidi.com. This is Fake and Tired, where your past becomes your peace. If you're exhausted trying to hide things from your past like shame and fear, if you're always faking your way through the day behind dozens of masks, you're in the right place. That "no, I'll be fine" mentality is not just tiring, it's debilitating. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi, from the podcast It's Not Normal, It's Toxic. Both podcasts are released twice a month. Here on Fake and Tired, we stop pretending, but also we laugh at ourselves when it doesn't work. This is for you who is running on frantic protect yourself mode, even when things around you are completely safe. We dive into the internal wreckage that's left over from emotional manipulation. So if you feel misunderstood by others, if your healthy relationships are suffering, or if you're running on autopilot, this is your home. I am only a few strides ahead of you, but we can learn how to feel for real and stop being so fake and tired. Now let's get to fake and work. Okay, so we're going to begin to dive into, with this episode, what this podcast was created for and what this show is really about and who this show is for. Part of the reason I'm doing this, and I'll talk about it as we go through this episode, but I had an experience a few years ago that I had a very hard time getting through. I could not find the help that I needed. I couldn't find the answers for it. I almost quit doing this work. I feel like the thought of disappearing from my life and moving to some cabin in the mountains where nobody knew where I was the only option. And so I went through the neurosomatic intelligence training certification, in which I began to understand myself a lot better and understand why I behave in certain circumstances and think certain things and react certain ways and feel things that other people around me didn't understand. And that's what Fake and Tired is for. It's for the people who have lived through a trauma situation or in an unhealthy relationship or been in an environment that was unsafe and then moved on, and now are finding that your healthy relationships are difficult. Being out in social circles is difficult. You worry about what people think about you. You have to be perfect all the time. You feel like you're better on a schedule, those type of things. And what happened to me is I all of a sudden started feeling like nobody understood what I was going through. Guess when else I felt like that? When I was in the middle of my toxic marriage, and I'd tell people and they didn't understand or wondered why I just left, or wonder why I wouldn't leave. I'm sorry. Why wasn't I strong enough to stand up for myself? I asked myself all the same questions because I didn't know the answers. But when I was able to take that certification and learn what happened within my body and within my nervous system in the years I was in that relationship, it literally freed me. Now, I've also come to the understanding that I will deal with this for the rest of my life. Not as bad, but we are what we've been through. And I also found that accepting myself for who I am now has brought a lot of peace to my life. So that's where the next few episodes are going to be. And then we're going to bring our hilarious co-host back to start talking about some of these things. But this is going to be a solo session of Fake and Tired. And again, I'm your host, Dr. Heidi. Yes, I'm also the host of It's Not Normal, It's Toxic. We just hit 250 episodes on that and over 2 million downloads. So if you are in a relationship and you're questioning whether it's healthy for you or not, It's Not Normal, It's Toxic is where I do the education on the toxic personality. Fake and Tired is where we do the education on ourselves and learn more about who we are supposed to be. So for those who don't know that much about me, I'm going to give you a short synopsis of my background. I say short synopsis, and anybody who's been in a relationship like I knows it's not a short synopsis. It's a story that once you get going, could take 6 or 7 hours, right? I'm not going to do that to you, but I'll shorten it up just so you know the reason behind my why. I was raised on a dairy farm in a small Christian community near Bozeman, Montana. Now, a few years ago, nobody knew where Bozeman, Montana was, but since Yellowstone came out, everybody knows where Bozeman, Montana was. I attended a Christian school there. I was in church twice a Sunday. My grandfather was a preacher, and my father was a part-time chaplain in the jail. I lived a very Groundhog's Day type of life in that community. But it was all I knew, and it was good. My childhood was happy. I saw the same people every day for the first 18 years of my life. Everybody in the community knew everybody. Everybody had others' best interest in mind, and all in the community were very close. And I was indeed protected from what I would call the real world. When I left to, quote, follow my dreams at 18, I assumed that the people in the world outside of my community would resemble the same type of people that I had grown up with inside that community. But boy, was I wrong. It was in grad school that I met a man who you will hear me refer to in the podcast as my former. I did not want to go on a date with this man. He wanted it differently. After 3 or 4 times of me turning him down, I started feeling guilty and that I was possibly being mean. So I agreed to a date. The same feeling came with the push for the second date. But again, I went. There was a feeling I had associated with him that something was not right. But because he was doing very nice, impressive dating type things, I weighed it back and forth and I could not bring myself to listen to that feeling. I didn't want to cause conflict. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't want to be the bad guy. So, very long story short, I was guilted into marriage, having a family, and running a business with him. That feeling never went away. Now, there would be good days and there would be bad days. There was a lot of chaos, lying, unpredictability, criticisms almost daily, manipulation, and a lot of control. With each passing year, it became worse. Until my fears of disappointing him, or my fears of letting him down, my fear of making him mad, my fear of having conflict with him, kept me paralyzed from standing up for myself or saying anything. I never went up against him. I didn't make any changes. I tried to keep things running as smoothly as I could, day after day after day. Again, somewhat of a groundhog's type of life. With my children yet young, I anticipated the fight that I would have if I tried to leave, and I just could not gain the courage to do so. As things continued to get worse and fights got more intense, and the control started to extend further and further into different parts of my life, my power, my identity, the ability to function with confidence grew less and less. After 14 years, I could not do it one more day of my life, and the only option that I saw was to run. That is another very, very long story. Now, the unique thing about the day that I ran away is this. I had already been divorced from him for 2 years, the day I knew I had to run. There were signed divorce papers, yet chaos and lying, unpredictability, criticisms, manipulation, and control was all exactly the same. We were living in separate houses, but working together every day because of his control over the business. So when I ran, I left my business, most of what I had worked for, and because I trusted the paperwork that said 50-50 custody of the children, I initially left them too. Turns out, the system does not work, or it never worked for me, which is part of why I do what I do. He kept my children away from me for almost 5 years. Also, a story for a different time. Little segue on the system doesn't work. I'm not saying it never works, But the system doesn't acknowledge emotional or psychological abuse the way they do domestic violence. If you say that they yelled at you and they criticize you and they control you, the system looks at you like, well, why don't you leave? They don't understand what I'm going to start talking about. They don't understand how you've been programmed. So after I left, I was a great distance from everything that I had knew and the life I had built. I could be whoever I wanted. I could do whatever I wanted. I could find my happiness and my peace. And it turns out I had no idea how to do any of that, because I had given it all up to my former just to keep him happy. I hadn't thought about what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be, what made me happy. Every moment for the 14 years prior was focused on him. He was my only attention receiving thing in my life for years. And that was me trying to anticipate what was coming next, so my attention was always on him. I tried to stay one step ahead to deflate any emergency situation that would have a chance of exploding. And now, I had no idea how to do things for me. I had no idea how to put myself first, how to make a decision, especially the ones that were best for me, or even know what made me happy. But nonetheless, I started over. I started over with work. I started over with friends. I was in a new location, with the majority of my efforts, of course, focused on climbing out of the financial hole I was forced into by leaving. Now, I say I started over, but in retrospect, it was more of a floating over. I was just taking what came along and was trying to make something out of it, rather than knowing what I wanted and making something happen for me. However, it was in this chapter that I met and married the man that you will hear me refer to in my podcast as my hot husband. Now, we've been together for 18 years now, and although, as any couple, have some tougher times, I give him credit for saving me. He won't take the credit, but I give it regardless. Through the years to come, I kept myself very, very busy, aka very, very distracted. But I felt okay about it because that's what I had grown used to. If I stayed busy and I was productive and I gave every ounce of energy I had, I must be doing something right. I didn't know any different, and I certainly didn't know that I was still living as if I was in danger when my life was not dangerous at all. So for years, I walked through the world believing that I was just naturally anxious. I just called it high energy. I thought helping others and putting them before me was normal. I just assumed it was my caregiving personality, so I was happy to do it. You give up yourself if you're a caregiver. I made sure that I did everything to my very best ability, and I focused on details, believing that that was my standard. Not at all. Turns out I was trained that everything under the level of perfect was considered failing and left an opening for criticism or unacceptance. So I held tight to the be perfect in all things mantra very tightly. After all, being perfect should prevent disappointment in others, right? And the last thing I wanted to do was disappoint people that were in my new life. I was alert, fact-oriented. I remembered everything. I was great at anticipating the things to come and heading them off at the pass. Turns out I'm just actually hyper-vigilant to my surroundings in an attempt to remain safe in a chaotic, unpredictable environment. Hyper alert just in case something happens. I was a multitasker from hell. I never needed to eat or sleep all that much. In reality, I was attempting to finish the to-do list, this big long list of tasks that I was responsible for, and sleeping and eating took the time away from it completely, which would result in failure or flaw. I didn't realize it for years, but in truth, I had integrated hundreds of different behaviors into my identity in order to survive in my former marriage. And now I was just calling it my personality. So if you ever felt like you were carrying this heavy, invisible weight, if you're exhausted by trying to monitor your reactions and the things you say, but you don't know how to turn them off, today and this podcast is for you. We aren't looking at the toxic person today. I do that in my other podcast. Here today, I'm going to encourage you to look in the mirror. If you have been in a relationship that resembles my former, you may have very well related to the things that I just mentioned. If you're a graduate of a toxic relationship and you could relate to the above, chances are you're still using some of the survival tactics that your body learned to guarantee your safety. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I'll cover more of it in the following episodes. Many of these behaviors have become the default reactions. Now, in today's world, we almost all know what default means, right? We all understand the concept of default. Meaning, these behaviors are what your body uses. It's what it knows. What your body knows works is what it's going to use. And it used these behaviors to an extent that they became the behaviors, the reactions, the responses that you always used in a toxic, unhealthy, unsafe environment. It adopted them as default because better safe than sorry is what your nervous system decided. These behaviors and tactics and ways to get around being in trouble or disappointing them, they were necessary and they made sense when you are in an unsafe place. But they're no longer needed 100% of the time if you're in a place where there's no threat. The problem we deal with as survivors of emotional manipulation is this. Someone who has not experienced a long-standing environment that causes your nervous system to adapt will see their world as safe until their brain processes it and goes, "Oh, this isn't safe." That's how I'm going to say normal. That's how someone is supposed to see the world. Everything's safe, but we have the survival instinct in case it's not. Well, those who have been in long-term abusive places, we have the gift of seeing everything as a threat until our body validates that it's not. So we come at every situation, every encounter, every conversation from a completely different perspective than someone who has not been through trauma or a toxic situation or an abusive situation. Your nervous system changed in order for you to stay safe and alive. And that's good. That's a good thing. But those behaviors and reactions now can be inappropriate. They can be over-exaggerated. They can make no sense in a safe, loving environment, especially to those who don't understand it. And once again, you find yourself being misunderstood and misplaced, which is exactly what you felt when you were in it. Because they've become reflexes or defaults, here's a more unsettling news. You can't necessarily control them. We can say, next time that happens, I'm not going to react that way. And guess what? It happens. And guess what? You do. Default survival tactics are so reflexive. You know when the doctor hits your knee with a hammer? You can say, I'm not going to let my leg jerk. Your leg's going to jump every time the doctor hits your knee with a reflex hammer. And these default survival tactics are so reflexive that your brain doesn't have the time to decide if you are or if you're not going to react in this or that way. You see, it takes energy for the brain to interpret if something is safe or not. So in a place where there's a lot of repetition of unsafe behaviors, it began looking for repeating patterns. It just made a few notes so that when it saw it again, it could skip over the part of having to process whether it's safe or not. That way it could save the energy for the next chaotic thing that was coming down the pipes. It kept you safe before by responding immediately without a thought. Unless we can interject thought and processing back into your nervous system, these default pathways are going to continue because the more they're used, the slicker and smoother they get. And everything is going to choose the slicker and smoother route if the opposite route is bumpy and treacherous. Now, I had to learn extensively about this 13 years after I got out of my former marriage. My now husband, which he will deny, so I won't have him listen to this episode, he went into what I call, whether it's a real thing or not, I'm going to call it his midlife crisis. Now, let me be clear. He didn't go buy a Corvette. He didn't get a girlfriend. He didn't even run out to the Buckle and buy affliction clothing. More, he became upset about where he was in life and his current employment and the situation that he had put himself in, and he became very negative. Not his normal. Very sarcastic. Not his normal. Very cynical. Not his normal. And that was opposite of what I had grown used to for the 13 years prior. The changes in him, even though they had nothing to do with me, reignited many of those survival tactics that I hadn't seen in a very long time. Now, remember, I just said above, your body started making notes, so when it saw something similar, it already knew how to respond. So when the negative and the sarcasm and the cynical came in, my default kicked back in. I hadn't seen it for years, and all of a sudden, there it was. Now, many of you would say trigger. I say activated. My nervous system sensed the irritability and the unhappiness, and I read it as, he's mad at me. He's criticizing me by saying that. I need to fix this for him. I'm not good enough. He's going to leave me. I better try harder. That's how my body read it, even though there was nothing about what was going on that had anything to do with me. The immediate responses were that of someone in a dangerously emotionally damaged place, and I indeed was not. You could not have guessed that I was in a safe place if you saw how my behaviors and reactions changed dramatically to what he was used to, which made him look at me like, how come you've changed? Which made me feel like, again, there's something wrong with me. He would tell me it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't me, but my body did not see it that way at all. I was in full post-trauma behavior. After years of not seeing it, all it took was my body to recognize or sense something similar, and it went right back into it. It was absolutely devastating for me and almost for our relationship. I was very, very misunderstood. I was very lost. I was very desperate to find answers at that point. So I don't want anybody else to feel as hopeless as I did 5 years ago when this happened. That's what Fake and Tired is for. I want to go through a list of behaviors, reactions, and responses that you may see in yourself if you've been in a long-standing toxic environment. I'm going to ask you some very specific questions. My goal is definitely not for you to judge yourself. It's to make you aware that some of the things you may see in yourself and possibly dislike about yourself, or have attempted to change, you might actually be the very things that one time kept you alive. So listen to these questions. Just listen to them. Don't overthink them. Just notice if your chest tightens, or if your gut gets a pain in it, or if your body has any type of reaction. You might sweat, your breathing might get shallow, because you may relate to some of these. Do you find yourself constantly scanning the room, reading people's moods, even if they're a room full of people you love? Do you continually track the little micro shifts in someone's tone of voice, in the speed that they're driving, how fast they're typing on their phone, how heavy they set their glass down. Do you find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do just to ensure that the place stays peaceful? Do you feel a deep sense of impending doom or the other shoe's going to drop the moment you sit down to rest? Do you feel like you have to earn your right to take a nap or watch a show by cleaning the house entirely or checking off that massive to-do list? Have you found that you can't actually enjoy a good day because you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, or you have this guilt of knowing there's things that need to be done? When someone asks you, "What do you want for dinner?" or "What do you want to do this weekend?" is your immediate reflexive answer, "I don't care," or "Whatever you want"? Have you done that for so long that you actually don't know what you want anymore? So it makes you feel anxious when somebody asks you. Little segue. My least favorite question every year is, "What do you want for your birthday?" I think after 18 years, I still get when somebody asks me that. Do you feel like a burden the moment you have a physical need, like being sick or needing money for new underwear or a haircut? After a normal, fun social gathering, do you go home and spend hours replaying everything you said and everything others have said and what they really meant by what they said to you? Are you looking for evidence that you offended someone, or convinced that everyone secretly talks about you or thinks you're too much or thinks there's something wrong with you? Do you find yourself always being the polite person, the high energy person, the do more, do over, overdo until you get in your car, and when you get in your car and sit down, you feel like you ran a marathon? Does making a simple choice like picking a paint color or choosing a restaurant feel like it's very high stakes and you don't know what other people are going to want, so you don't dare say what you want? Are you constantly looking for external approval or permission before you make a move? Do you interview everybody before you make a decision? Do you take things people say very personal, even when they don't mean them that way, and then overreact in a way that ends in humiliation? Do you feel out of sorts when your schedule or your to-do list gets interrupted by life? Do you focus on the future and attempt perfection by overplanning or overpacking or overorganizing? Do you find yourself coping with behaviors that may not seem unhealthy, but can become that way, like social scrolling, phone game playing, online shopping, organizing, reorganizing, thrifting? There's a couple in there I've caught myself doing. If you answered yes to even 3 of those, I want you to take a deep breath. 4 seconds in through your nose, 8 seconds out through your mouth. Inhalation is activating, exhalation is letting go. So I say deep breath because I know you're feeling like something is wrong with you. These behaviors were originally set in place with good intention by your nervous system. You needed them when it happened. The default was set, and it's overriding your ability to control them. Now, for the longest time, I thought these behaviors were my flaws. I thought I was weak. I thought I was indecisive. I thought I was crazy. I thought I didn't really have an opinion. I thought I was making everyone in my life miserable. But here's the truth. None of these things are your actual personality. They're lasting effects from living in an environment where the success of your day or how you felt about yourself depended on somebody else's mood or how somebody else treated you. You had to become an expert in the tone of voice, body language, and how to fix literally everything. When you live with someone who punishes you, You have to learn to be invisible. When you live with someone who mocks your choices, you have to stop making them. When you know you'll be in trouble if you don't immediately text them back, every text ever since then has become an SOS emergency situation, even when they're not. Are you an anxious person? You're a person who's been highly trained to anticipate danger. There's a massive difference. Now, you might be asking, Dr. Heidi, I've been out of that relationship for years. Why am I still going through this? It's embarrassing. I'm feeling hopeless. I've been trying to fix this. I've tried talk therapy. I've tried all of this stuff. Truth is, when we're talking about this, and in my experience, every time I talked about it, it made it worse because my survival mode kicked in just from talking about it. This is exactly what we're going to spend the next 2 episodes talking about. I'll be doing a 2-part series on how the nervous system adapts or changes or takes over in order to perform the number one thing that the nervous system was designed to do. And that is to keep you safe and to keep you alive. In part 1, we're going to look at what actually happened in your body while you were in that relationship. We're going to talk about how your brain literally rewired itself to prioritize survival over everything else. In part 2, we're going to talk about why that survival mode is now your body's default setting. Explore why your nervous system is still trying to protect a version of you that is no longer in danger. And most importantly, we'll start the process of teaching you how to override those things so you can finally stop doing things outside of your control and start living. You've been wearing that battle armor of safety for so long, you've forgotten what your skin feels like. It's time to take it off. I'll see you next time as we go through the nervous system changes. I talk a lot here about the aftermath of toxic relationships, but maybe you're not even sure if your past or current relationship was toxic, or maybe you think you might have been the problem. That confusion is exhausting. To skip that exhaustion and get straight to clarity, I offer you the You've Got to Be Kidding Me validation session. This is an intense 3-hour educational session dedicated to your personal situation. We'll help you see the relationship through the eyes of the other person, giving you the foundation of understanding, decision-making power, and the clarity needed to make the very best choices for you. I know you won't leave or make changes until you are ready, but with this session, when you're ready, you'll also be prepared. Get the clarity you deserve with the You've Got to Be Kidding Me validation session at coachingwithdrheidi.com.